Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacarya Ashtottara Siddha Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shramaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaur Prem Anande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga Hari Hari Bo. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Krishnaya Pantale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswate Deve Guruvani Acharya Vishishya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Prahlad Lad Daine. Hiranyakashipur Bhakshaha. Hiranyakashipur Bhakshaha. Shilatank Nakalai Ito Nrisingha Parato Nrisingho Jato Jato Jamitato Nrisingha Bahir Nrisingho Hridaye Nrisingho Nrisingha Mading Sharanam Prapagye Nrisingha Mading Sharanam Prapagye Tavakar Kamala Bare Nakam Adbhuta Sringa Dorita Hiranya Kashipu Tanu Bringa Keshavadrita Nara Hari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Vakara Kamala Hare Krishna Krishna Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Shashi Hare Krishna devotees, guests, welcome to our virtual Sunday Feast program. Thank you to everyone joining us via Zoom, as well as our Philadelphia YouTube channel. Thank you to Vishnu-Ghara Prabhu for leading us in a wonderful Sankirtan for the pleasure of their lordships. Wonderful kirtan. Hopefully it was clear to those of you at home. Tonight we're going to continue our study of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. We're doing a presentation series, topic by topic of the second chapter. Before we get into that though, before we turn it over to that, we want to take everybody on a quick
darshan of their lordships. Today is Valentine's Day, and so the deities have a red theme today, an occasion. So here, if you want to take yourselves off of mute just for a second while we greet the deities. Start with His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Now we had different devotees. They sponsored flower arrangements for their lordships, as well as some devotees came to pick up flowers for their loved ones. So we see the altars nicely decorated with many different flower bouquets. Paramakaruna Shishi Gaur Nitai Ki.
Yay.
If anybody would like a flower arrangement that has been offered to the Lord, you can come by later tonight and help support the temple through this flower marathon that we do, fundraiser. Shri Baladev, Shri Lady Subhadra, Lord Jagannath Ki.
Yay.
The most beautiful lordships, Shri Shri Radha Sharad Bihari Ki.
Yay.
You notice they have one special red outfit. Of course, we know that Radha and Krishna are the supreme lover and beloved, the supreme enjoyer and the enjoyed. And even though this is somewhat of a secular holiday, this Valentine's Day, everything has its origin in the spiritual world. And the loving affairs of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna are we can remember those on this day. You know that Lord Krishna is Madan Mohan. You know, he's the charmer of Cupid, and you know, Radharani is Madan Mohan Mohini, he who charms even the charmer of Cupid. So tonight we have with us His Grace Ananda Vilas Prabhu from out in the Harrisburg area. We're very happy to have him with us tonight. He's been a part of our community for quite some time now, even though he does a lot of preaching out there. We're thankful that he comes and joins us to, you know, give various classes, helps participate in our Rath Yatra, and different activities we do here at ISKCON Philadelphia. He is a disciple of His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj, and you know, quite conversant in the Bhagavad Gita and the other scriptures. He has many different preaching programs that he holds, and we're very eager to hear from him tonight on the topic of spiritual determination from the Bhagavad Gita. The Hare Krishna Nandi Vilas Prabhu, are you with us here? I don't see him quite yet. Let's just give a minute here. We'll just be there in 1 minute. Hare Krishna devotees, Ananda Vilas Prabhu will be joining us in just a moment. There we go.
Hare Krishna.
Jai.
Hare Krishna. Sorry
Hare
for the
Krishna, Ananda
confusion.
Vilas Prabhu. My
Sorry for-
apologies to you and to the devotees for keeping you waiting just for a moment.
Thank you. I'm glad we finally
Um,
connected, so it's good.
So I gave you an introduction. I gave an introduction to His Grace Nandi Vilas Prabhu. I also want to mention that I also want to mention that Nandi Vilas Prabhu, we also have a viewing audience also on our YouTube channel, which is not visible here. So we have we have some people that joined through that as well. So anyway, we're incredibly grateful that you joined us today. I gave the introduction how you're a disciple of His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj. You're doing incredible preaching out in the Harrisburg, Mechanicsville area. You serve at Gita Nagari Dham. And you've also participated in many of the activities here at ISKCON Philadelphia with our Rath Yatras, our preaching, and given many classes here. We're grateful to have you with us today. And we're getting started a little late on my account. So I want to jump right into it and not take up too much time.
Thank you.
Introduction. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. And I'm so grateful that I have a chance to speak a little bit from the Bhagavad Gita and to the devotees of ISKCON Philadelphia. So thank you for having me. Today's topic, I understand, is spiritual determination. And so I have a few slides that just can help us guide the discussion. So I'll put them up in a second. I just wanted to start with offering prayers to Srila Prabhupada and the spiritual master and the acharyas. Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschyate Deshadarane Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Jnanatimidandhasya Jnananjana Chalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Hare Krishna, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see it. And I share it. Give me 1 second. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you. So today I was asked to speak a little bit about developing spiritual determination. And the two texts that I was asked to speak on were from the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, text 241 and 244. So we will get to recite those verses as well. And then see a little bit about how the Shastras describe this topic and the importance of this topic. So we will discuss a couple of questions as part of our discussion here today. The first is, what is spiritual determination? Try to understand what it is. And this is all based on what the Shastras say and what I've heard from my spiritual master and other senior devotees that have had a good fortune of learning from. So we'll hear about what is spiritual determination. And then maybe some examples of individuals, both from the Shastra and people that we've heard of that have displayed spiritual determination. And then the question is, why should we develop it, right? So it's good to know, okay, this is spiritual determination, but how does it apply in our lives? Why should we develop spiritual determination? And once we're convinced that, yes, there is a valid reason for us to develop spiritual determination, then the next question is, then how should we develop it? What should we actually do to develop spiritual determination? So this is what we will cover today, beginning with what is spiritual determination, some examples, why we should develop it, and then how we should develop it. And hopefully, as part of this discussion, we'll be able to have some tips of how we can apply some of these things in our life as we try to increase our our sadhana, improve our sadhana, and get spiritual determination in our spiritual lives. So since we're already behind, I'm just going to get into the material, and I will pause for questions. So if there are questions or clarifications, feel free. We can have that, or there'll also be time at the end where we can discuss any questions, and I'd also like to hear some observations or comments from the devotees if they have something to share. I'd love to hear that as well. So we'll just chant the 2 verses. These are 2 verses that were given to me as the central verses to discuss this topic. So these are very famous verses from the Gita. One is the Vyavasatmika Buddhi verse, and there's another verse which is text 44. So we'll read these 2 verses. And since it's not a in-person setting, it's hard to do call and response or anything of that sort. So I'll just read the verses. You can read with me if you like, and if you're on mute, that's fine too. You can still read with me, and then we can read the translation of these 2 verses. So at least we get grounded on what these 2 verses are. The first verse is a very famous one. Most of you probably already have it memorized. This is text 41, Krishna speaking, and this is in the section of the 2nd chapter where Krishna is starting to speak about Nishkam Karma Yoga. So he's spoken about the science of the soul from text 11 through 30, and then from 31 onwards he starts speaking about Karma Kanda and how Arjun can enjoy by fighting, and then he starts speaking from text 38 onwards about this Karma Yoga, Nishkam Karma Yoga. So he describes the focus first, and he describes how we can start practicing this, and he starts getting into the Karmarneva Adhikaraste verse that's much later in the same section where he speaks about definition of Nishkam Karma Yoga. That's how this verse is in this chapter, and we'll just chant it. Vyavasayapnika buddhir ekeha kurunandana Baushakhayanantascha buddhayo vyavasayinam. I'll chant again. So someone who's trying to chant with me can try again. Vyavasayapnika buddhir ekeha kurunandana Baushakhayanantascha buddhayo vyavasayinam. Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. Once again, those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. Prabhupada gives a very wonderful purport to this verse, and I would definitely encourage all the devotees to read the purport, even if you've read it in the past. Just go back and read the purport. And I wanted to tell you one story about this purport, which His Grace Buddhajana Prabhu speaks about in his Surrender Unto Me. Very striking. And Buddhajana Prabhu says that when Prabhupada read this purport, he was reading the commentaries of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in the 50s, sometime in the 50s, 1950s. He was reading studying the commentaries of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And in those commentaries, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur speaks about this verse and specifically says that the aim is one, the resolute in purpose. This really applies to a disciple who wants to follow the order of the spiritual master. And for a sincere disciple, the order of the spiritual master, the purpose of the spiritual master's mission is the aim of their life. And they're willing to dedicate everything to fulfill that mission, that vision of the spiritual master. And Prabhupada spoke about this point to his disciples when he came to America. I was speaking about this point to his disciples, and he said that this struck him. And when he read the commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he made it a resolute determination in his mind that he has to, by any means, follow the order of the spiritual master. And if you recall, way back in 1922, when Srila Prabhupada first met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in Calcutta, one Ultradanda Junction Road, that Gaudiya Math ashram, the rooftop of that ashram where Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was giving a lecture, and Srila Prabhupada, young Abai, was in his mid to early 20s, right? When he saw his spiritual master for the first time, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati gave him a lifelong mission. He told him that you're a young man, you educated young man. You should be preaching the mission of Lord Chaitanya in the English language in the Western world. So when he saw him for the first time, he gave him a lifelong mission. And Srila Prabhupada took that mission. And he says to his disciples much later on that when I read the translation and the commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, this struck me that yes, this is absolutely what I should be doing. And he redoubled this resolve to do what his guru had asked him to do. So Burjan Prabhu says that this particular verse has a lot of significance to the devotees of, especially in ISKCON, because of Srila Prabhupada's determination was redoubled when he read the commentary of this particular verse. Let's read this next verse as well, which is 44. Add that up. Bhogaishwarya prasaktanam taya pahrita chetasam vyavasayapnika buddhir samadhau na vidhiyate. I'll read it again. Bhogaishwarya prasaktanam taya pahrita chetasam vyavasayapnika buddhir samadhau na vidhiyate. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. I'll read it again. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. So if you contrast these two verses, the first verse talks about those who are resolute in purpose, their aim is one. But those who are not resolute, their intelligence is many-branched. And in this text, Krishna says that, but those who are so attached to material sense enjoyment and opulence, it's very difficult for them to make determination for service to the Supreme Lord. So in one sense, material opulence and opportunity for sense enjoyment becomes a distraction. It becomes a detractor in our path of bhakti. So we saw that at one place Krishna is saying that it's important to have a strong focus to progress in bhakti. And at the same time, he also warns us that if we are too attached to sense gratification, and if you're too bewildered by material opulence, then it's very difficult for us to have a strong determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord. It does not take place. So in the context of these two verses, let's try to understand what actually is spiritual determination. Why should we try to cultivate it, and how can we cultivate it? And maybe in the next 30 minutes or so, we'll go through some of those points, and then hopefully you'll have a discussion where we can actually hear from everybody's experience also in terms of how you can overcome challenges and some of these other points. Any questions so far? I'm going to just pause for maybe just a minute or so, see if there are any questions or anybody has any comments before we proceed.
I have a question, but I'll ask you at the very end.
Okay, that's fine. All right. So what is spiritual determination? And I've taken points from the Shastras and made a quick summary of what it is, right? So, and the phrase that I've written here is just a distillation of what the Shastras talk about as spiritual determination. There's so much in the Bhagavatam, there's so much in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and of course in the Bhagavad Gita itself on spiritual determination and what it is. Rupa Goswami Pad, he has written about this in the Upadekshamrita. It's an intense and unshakable commitment to our spiritual practice, regardless of material circumstances, favorable or unfavorable. Rupa Goswami says in the Upadekshamrita, Text 3 talks about Utsahan Nishchayan Dhairya. This Nishchaya or determination is what he talks about. Is one of the essential ingredients for bhakti, for us to practice bhakti. So this becomes an intense and unshakable commitment. So we can have a commitment to bhakti, but it may not be intense, or it may not be unshakable because we may be easily distracted. That's not determination. Spiritual determination, strong spiritual determination, is actually characterized by an unshakable and intense commitment for spiritual practice. And it has to be despite material circumstances, despite favorable or unfavorable circumstances. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur speaks about this in the Madhurya Kadambini also. That he speaks about how devotees go through various phases in their bhakti. He talks about this Ghana Tarala. Ghana Tarala means sometimes it's intense and sometimes it becomes very shallow. It depends upon how our material circumstances are being shaped. That sometimes our intensity of bhakti is super strong and we're very fired up. And sometimes we're not very fired up at all. We're just completely struggling to even do the basics, like chanting our rounds. And that is Ghana Tarala. And that's the sign of a Kanishta, that we go through these phases. But then we have to use spiritual determination to overcome. This idea of favorable or unfavorable also he speaks about. The concept is called Vastu Vishishta Apekshaniya. In the Madhurya Kadambini speaks about this concept where if our bhakti is dependent on material circumstances. So for instance, an easy example is we may like kirtan, but we like kirtan only if the singer is melodious. He sings in tune and he sings very nicely, and we enjoy kirtan. If the kirtan is not sung well, it becomes very difficult for us to appreciate the holy name in kirtan, which means that our appreciation for the holy name is dependent on other factors, like it should be sung well, the instrument should be played nicely. So our taste is actually more in the musical accompaniment rather than the holy name itself. Actually, interesting anecdote. When Srila Bhakti-Siddhanta Saraswati would train his brahmachari disciples, he would often have the most off-tune brahmachari sing kirtan. Right? So the person who would sing kirtan would not be the person who sang the best, but actually the person who sang the worst. And in a way to encourage his disciples to actually focus on the holy name and get the taste of the holy name. Of course, this is not a way to attract new devotees. So in temples, we can't do that. We have to still present philosophy in a very nice way so that even newcomers are attracted and they see beautiful kirtan happening. So that has to be there. That has to be a factor of how we attract people to Krishna consciousness. But at the same time, as practicing devotees, as sadhakas, our attraction to the practice of bhakti cannot be solely dependent on the external factors. It cannot be just solely dependent on how favorable the circumstances are, how well everything else is going. If everything else is good, then I'm going to practice bhakti. If there are things that start shaking up in my life, I can't practice bhakti. That's not a sign of spiritual determination. So spiritual determination is characterized by this unshakable commitment that I'm going to practice bhakti no matter what. It doesn't matter if I feel good about it, if I don't feel good about it, if I feel I'm making progress, if I'm not making progress, if I'm appreciated, I'm not appreciated, doesn't matter. This is my connection with Krishna. This is my commitment to my spiritual master, the mission of Lord Chaitanya, the mission of Srila Prabhupada, and this is what I'm doing. And once we get to the point where our practice of bhakti is not dependent on external factors like other people appreciating us or getting reciprocation, then we're actually in the path of bhakti. We're actually starting to make progress at that point, where it's not going to depend on whether somebody appreciates us or reciprocates with us that we practice bhakti or not. And that is the first sign that we're actually exhibiting spiritual determination. And it requires some preliminary faith, right? So this process of Krishna consciousness, we hear the chant and be happy, or chant your rounds. And we may not be at a point where we experiencing ruchi or taste and ecstasy in chanting the holy name, but we have some faith. Our spiritual master has told us, or some senior devotees have told us, that we should chant the holy name. We have some faith that we should chant the holy name. We look at the deities, we offer obeisances, we offer our bhoga, take prasadam, and we do this with some faith. Although we may not have full realization yet, we start with some faith. Rupa Goswami speaks about this in quite detail in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He speaks about this in great detail. He speaks about the processes of bhakti, ado shraddha, tata sadhu sango, bhajana kriya, anartha nivritti syat, nishtha, asakti, prema. He speaks about these different stages, and it's a little beyond the topic that we're discussing, but the progression is important to understand, that it all begins with ado shraddha, initially a little bit of faith. It requires a little bit of faith to do anything, for that matter, right? So for the matter, if we go to a college chemistry class, we have to accept some of the points that are being said in the class, or even a high school chemistry class. The teacher says, okay, this and this and this reacts, and this is what happens. We accept it initially, and then we may be qualified enough to perform the experiments to validate. But it starts with some faith in what the teacher is saying. Similarly, spiritual life is that way. Before we are qualified to actually practice and experience the results, we have to accept with some faith so we can actually practice. And of course, it requires patience to persevere. Like most things, right? Things don't happen instantaneously. If someone wants to learn to play a violin, it's not like you buy a violin and you practice for a couple of hours and then you can start playing all sorts of wonderful tunes. It doesn't work that way. It takes years and years of practice. It takes perseverance. It's not something that happens overnight. So spiritual determination is exhibited with commitment, exhibited with perseverance. We'll talk about some of these things towards the later part of our discussion as well, but just wanted to give a sense of what is spiritual determination. So now that we at least understand at a high level what it is, let's try to look at a couple of examples. Now, these examples are very familiar to all of us as devotees. We know these examples, and I'll just point out how these individuals exhibited spiritual determination. The first example I'll speak about is Dhruva Maharaj. We all know the story of Dhruva Maharaj. It appears in the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The word Dhruva itself means determination. Dhruva means fixed. That's what Dhruva means. It's like the Dhruva star. It's fixed, North Pole. So if you're in the old times when people were lost, they would navigate using the North Pole. It was fixed in the sky. It would not go from one direction to the other. So you could actually navigate using the North Pole star. That is Dhruva Maharaj's star. So Dhruva was fixed. He was only 5 years old. You all know the story that when his stepmother insulted him, he was sitting on the lap of, tried to sit on the lap of his father. His brother Uttam was sitting on the lap of his father. So he desired too. He was only 5 years old, just like a 5-year-old boy. He wanted to sit on the lap of his father. And his stepmother said, well, you can't. You have to actually be born from my womb to sit in the lap of your father. She's literally telling the little boy that you have to die because he's already born. He's already 5 years old. So the only way he can be born from Suruchi's womb is if he dies and takes another birth. So she's telling him that in order to sit on your father's lap, you have to actually die. In this birth, there's no possibility. So you die, you take birth again, and then you can sit. And this was a real insult to the little boy. And what was worse, that the father didn't actually protest. He didn't actually stop Suruchi from saying that. He just sat quietly. We won't get into all those details, but essentially, this little boy was supremely insulted. He felt really insulted. And he was very angry. And he went crying to his mother, Suniti, and asked her and told her this is what happened. And Suniti was helpless. She said, well, what can I do? I'm not the favorite queen of the king. And your stepmother is actually right? That if you really want something, you have to worship the Lord. And so Dhruva was determined. Said, okay, then if that is the case, if you can't help me, my father can't help me, let me go and worship the Lord and get a kingdom that's even greater in the kingdom of my grandfather, Brahma. Why should I worry about an earthly kingdom and the lap of my father? I'm going to get a kingdom that's even greater than my grandfather. And then let's see how he doesn't let me sit on my father's lap. So that was his mood. He was just a 5-year-old boy. And while he was going to the forest, Narada Muni, and Narada Muni is everywhere in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And actually, according to the commentary of some of the acharyas, the whole Srimad Bhagavatam is a glorification of Narada Muni. In every canto he appears, and it's so beautiful. If you actually understand how Narada Muni is speaking in every canto of the Bhagavatam and so wonderfully providing us insights into how we can actually practice the life of a bhakta, of a devotee. So anyway, so Narada Muni meets Dhruva and asks him, so where are you going? And Dhruva explains to him, saying, this is what happened, and I'm going to the forest, and I'm going to meditate and pray to the Lord and get a kingdom greater than my grandfather. So Narada Muni tries to discourage him. It tells him that, you know what, you're a little boy. And little boy shouldn't be so upset when an older person scolds them. You shouldn't take it to heart. You should just let it go. Right? So it's not a big deal. Right? So you're a little kid, somebody told you something or somebody chastised you, that's okay. It's, you should take it as a blessing of the elders and they should just go back home. It's not a big deal. Why are you making such a big deal? So he discourages him, telling him it's not a big deal. And then he tells him, on the other hand, if you don't think you're a little boy, if you think you're a grown-up person, then you should forgive. If you think you're a little child, you should forget. And if you think you're not a child, then you should forgive. In either case, there's no reason for you to leave home and do this. And anyway, what you're trying to achieve, to go to the forest and meditate on the Lord, is not easy. You can't do it. A little boy can't do it. It's not something for a little boy. You better go home. You're used to living in your palace and you're used to your playthings and your nice bed and your nice food. You're not going to be able to do this. It's not going to work for you. This is not something you just, it's not like we can decide to take a plane ticket to New Delhi and then take a train to the Himalayas and then start spending the next 40 years of our life in the Himalayas. We won't be able to do it. The same point, Narada Muni is telling this little boy, you're only a little boy. You can't do it. And Dhruva is not in the mood to listen. And he says, okay, now all these things that you're saying, they sound good, they sound logical, but they're not for me. I'm a Kshatriya. I'm not going to be pacified. My blood's boiling, so I'm going to do this one way or the other. So either you help me or I'm going to do this. And when Narada Muni sees the strong determination of Dhruva, then he says, okay, I see that you're determined. I'm going to give you this mantra, this Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya mantra. He gives him the mantra and he goes and practices austerity with full determination and achieves his goal. So that's a determination of a 5-year-old boy. It kind of tells you that you don't have to be, it doesn't matter whether you're young or old or rich or poor, you can still develop spiritual determination. The other example is our own Srila Prabhupada. It's a lifetime of preparation. You look at the life of Srila Prabhupada. It's not like all of a sudden at 70 decided that he wanted to come to America and then somebody bought him a plane ticket and organized a whole bunch of things here and he just came and did it. No, it's a lifetime of preparation. Like we discussed, it was 1922 when he got the order of a spiritual master to preach in the West in the English language. 1922. Think about that for a second. 1922, Srila Prabhupada got the order from the spiritual master. It took 11 years for him to get initiation. He didn't get initiated right away. He wasn't initiated. So although Prabhupada writes in many places in the purports that right at that very moment when I was defeated by my spiritual master, I'd accepted him in my heart as my guru. Although not formally initiated, I'd already accepted him. Srila Prabhupada got initiated in 1933. So 1922, he got the order, met a spiritual master for the first time. He got initiated in 1933. In 1944, he started Back to Godhead. In 1955, he left home. In 1966, he started ISKCON. In 1977, he went back to the spiritual world. It's a beautiful timeline of Srila Prabhupada. So it's a lifetime of preparation. Even if you read His Holiness Satsvarup Maharaj's Lilamrita, Prabhupada Lilamrita, the first section is called Lifetime of Preparation. And he tried so many times. He started the League of Devotees, that was complete failure. He tried preaching in so many places. And if you read the initial struggle, even in Delhi and in Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada had, it was just heartbreaking. He would personally walk, or he would not be able to eat breakfast. He would walk, he would collect paper, he would, with great difficulty, publish this Back to Godhead magazine to be able to distribute them. The publisher would ask him, why are you taking so much trouble? Nobody seems to want to read this. Nobody seems to care. And whatever money you have, you're spending all your money. You don't even have money. It's such a huge struggle for you to even publish this small pamphlet that you're creating, the Back to Godhead, but you seem to be so intent on doing it. The level of determination, there was no guarantee of success, but Srila Prabhupada was not thinking about that. This was even before he came to America, even before he boarded the Jaladuta. The level of intense struggle Srila Prabhupada went through. There's a passage in the Lilamrita where Prabhupada talks about, he was living in one of the Gaudiya Math temples, and he wanted to collect some money for his translations. He was starting to work on the translation of Bhagavatam. So he writes to the president of that temple, or the leader of that matha, that could I get 2 sets of dhoti and kurta so that I could have clean clothes when I meet people, so that I can ask for, when I ask people for donations for the books that I want to write. Srila Prabhupada had to ask permission from, he had no money, he had absolutely no money. Even to buy a set of kurta and dhoti, he had to ask money. That was his position. But that didn't deter him, that didn't stop him. He would personally write the manuscripts, and the amount of trouble he took to even publish the first volume of Srimad Bhagavatam, even before he boarded Jaladuta. And even the amount of trouble that he took to even get on the Jaladuta. Srimati Morarji, she was not willing to give him the ticket. She considered him like an elderly sadhu. She respected him like her own father. And she said, there's absolutely no way that I'm going to send you to America on a ship. You're not going to make it alive. You're not going to make it back alive. And I don't want to be the cause for the death of an elderly sadhu. So I cannot, in good conscience, allow you to do that. America is very cold. Like we're all experiencing here, it's very cold. Or somebody who's never left India ever in his life, it's a cold place. And it's difficult for someone like Srila Prabhupada to even imagine how he would survive here. But he was determined. He sat outside her office for days until she relented and said, okay, I'll give you a passage on the steamship. It was not some kind of cruise liner with all sorts of facilities that you see advertised nowadays with all sorts of entertainment and nice foods and everything. It was just this was a cargo ship. And he was one of the few passengers on that ship. And he was a 70-year-old man. He was living in Vrindavan, in Seva Kunj, in Radha Damodar temple, next to Rupa Goswami Samadhi. That's where people, devotees, Vaishnavas go to retire and give up their bodies in the association of the Samadhi of Rupa Goswami and other Vaishnavas. But Srila Prabhupada, he was so intent on giving us mercy that he was determined. And of course, even after he came to New York, it was not rosy for him. The first year or so, he was struggling alone. He had no followers, no money, no prospects, nothing. And then somehow somebody put down the deposit for 1 month rent for the storefront. The storefront was called Matchless Gifts. It's on 26 2nd Avenue in New York, Lower East Side. Not the best part of town. not Upper West Side. It's not where all the rich people lived and all the more classier swamis and yogis went to have armchair discussions in philosophy. This was the Skid Row of New York. That's where Srila Prabhupada went. And all he had was somebody had decided or agreed to put down 1 month's deposit or 1 month's rent for a little storefront called Matchless Gifts. And there was no idea. He had no idea how even the next month's rent would be paid. He had no idea. There was no bank account, or there was no membership drive or anything of that sort. The boys and girls who were coming and hearing him were mostly paupers themselves. Most of them had no money themselves. So it's not like he was patronized by a number of rich people. That was not the case. And look at Srila Prabhupada's determination. He was determined. He actually wrote to his godbrothers back in India, the Gaudiya Math godbrothers, that we now have a temple, Radha Krishna temple, established in New York City. Think about the confidence of Srila Prabhupada. There's a conversation that Srila Prabhupada has with another person who, forget the person's name, but he worked in the I think the subway system in New York, and he was telling him that, I have a lot of followers and temples, but only time is separating us. It's all going to manifest over time. Srila Prabhupada was so confident. Right? He was so confident in the words of his guru, and in the mercy of the holy name, the mercy of the spiritual masters, and the mercy of the Lord, that he was so convinced, and his determination was unshakable. When the Chaitanya Charitamrita had to be published, and he wanted it to be published in 21 days, and the devotees who were working on it said, impossible. And Prabhupada responded that impossible is a word in the Fool's Dictionary. And he pushed the devotees, and they actually did it. In 21 days, they published the remaining volumes of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So, as followers of Srila Prabhupada, moment of ISKCON, we don't have to look anywhere else for a great example of a person with unlimited spiritual determination than Srila Prabhupada. So that actually, makes the question, why should we develop spiritual determination, really easy? Because this is what Srila Prabhupada wanted us to do. This quote from Srila Prabhupada: anyone who is steady in his determination for the advanced stage of spiritual realization and can equally tolerate the onslaughts of distress and happiness is certainly a person eligible for liberation. Anyone who is steady in his determination for the advanced stage of spiritual realization. The simple answer is because Srila Prabhupada wanted us to have spiritual determination. Why should we have it? Because he wanted it. Because he told us that's the only way we can make progress. So how about we break it down a little more in terms of what does that mean? So we discussed some of these points earlier. Like, for instance, you can't actually achieve anything, even mundane things, without determination, right? So gave the example of playing a violin, right? So if you wanted to play a piano or a violin, any musical instrument, you start with some basic lessons. You play scales for a while, and if you go to the teacher for the first day and say, well, I need to play a song, well, you need to first learn how to hold the violin. That might take you a couple of days to at least even hold it correctly, and then use the bow correctly, and then you start playing scales for a while. And you learn to play the scales at different speeds, and then you start playing some very basic tunes, and then maybe you can play a song. It takes a while, right? So then how can we expect spiritual advancement without determination? If you give up quickly, or if you give up easily, not determined, how's it going to work? Okay. And the reality is progress in any path, not just bhakti, but any spiritual path. Krishna speaks about a number of paths in the Gita, although he firmly emphasizes in the end that we should become devotees. He says in the end of the 9th chapter, Man manabo mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. Mam evaishityuktevam atmana mat parayana. Become my devotee, offer your obeisances to me. Think of me. He makes it very clear. And then he says almost the same thing at the end of the 18th chapter. Slight variation. Man manabo mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. Mam evaishasi satyam te pratijane priyosi me. And then 1866, he says, Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja. Aham tvam sarva papyebhyo moksha ishyami ma sucha. He wants us to become his devotees, surrender to him. That's what Krishna wants, bhakti yoga. But the other paths, the jnana path, the karma yoga path, the dhyana yoga path, right? After hearing what Krishna has to say about dhyana yoga in chapter 6, Arjun says, this path that you've explained is unendurable. It's not something I can do. It's not practical for me. So Arjun's reaction after hearing that is that, based on my current situation, I can't even do this. And Krishna's response is that, yeah, yes, it's difficult, but it's possible with suitable practice and detachment. But with a controlled mind, you can do this. So spiritual determination helps us become steady and focused in our spiritual practice. That's the basic reason why we have to develop spiritual determination. Because without spiritual determination, we will not become steady and focused, because ups and downs will come. There will be times when we will feel so enthused about our Krishna consciousness that it's very easy. We get up before even our alarm goes off. We're able to enthusiastically chant our rounds and very enthusiastically perform our seva. There'll be times when we don't feel like doing it. That is why we're called sadhakas, practitioners. If that was not a situation that we were in, then we would be siddhas. We would be perfect. But since we are not siddhas, we should not be surprised that we have these problems, because that is how it is going to be. That is the definition of a sadhaka, which is what spiritual determination helps us overcome. It's always easy to do things when you're feeling great about it, but determination comes into the picture when we don't feel like doing it, but we have to do it. And that's when determination helps us. Srimad Bhagavatam, I quoted this verse here. It's a very beautiful verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, the first canto, second chapter. With one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who's the protector of the devotees. Very beautiful verse. Tasmad ekena manasa bhagavan satvatam pati shrotavya kirtitavyascha dheya pujascha nityada. Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should become spiritually focused. Shrotavya, hearing. Kirtitavyascha, glorifying, speaking. Dheya, remembering, thinking about. Puja, worshipping. Nityada, always. So constantly, for us to constantly do this. And Srila Prabhupada addressed this as well, right? So as grahasthas, most of us are grahasthas, we may not have the opportunity to do 24-hour seva or chanting. But Prabhupada said that for us, if you can do it in a regulated manner every day, it's Nityam Bhagavata Seva. To chant around sort of every day, read Bhagavatam every day, it becomes Nityam. And spiritual determination is also needed for controlling our mind. Krishna speaks about this quite eloquently in 6th chapter. He speaks about the mind. That the mind can be a friend, also can be an enemy. These verses are so beautiful. Uddhiryad atmanatmanam, na atmanam avasadayat, atmaiva atmanor bandhu, atmaiva rupuratmanaha. This 6.5. That one must deliver oneself with the help of the mind. And the next verse also speaks about the mind can be the best of the friend, also can be enemy, based on how we deal with the mind. So with determination, we have to control the mind. That then helps us achieve the ability to practice and become steady in our spiritual practice. Just looking at the time here. So a little bit about why we should develop spiritual determination. It's going to wrap up with how we can develop. Now that hopefully everybody is convinced that there's a reason for developing spiritual determination and why we should develop it, we'll just wrap it up with discussing how we can develop. Some practical tips, right? So nothing too theoretical that we can apply. So I just was thinking about what I have learned from my teachers and how we can actually practically apply some of these things to develop spiritual determination. The first thing is prioritization. Because in order to get determined with something, the first thing is prioritization. If you don't prioritize things that are important for our sadhana, they'll always be secondary. They'll always be things that we can do after we do other things. So I personally found that prioritizing at least very simple things like chanting our rounds and reading Srila Prabhupada books is a very critical first step in developing spiritual determination. What does that mean practically, right? So for instance, all of us have some rounds we chant. The initiated devotees chant 16 rounds. Others who are still becoming familiar with the process, maybe chanting 8 rounds, 4 rounds, or maybe even 1 round. But let's make it a priority, no matter what stage we are at. Let's make it our priority. Let's make it our priority that first thing in the morning, that's what I will do. I will make sure I will chant my rounds before I do anything else. And if you make it a priority, then we plan accordingly. So if chanting our rounds is priority, then the previous night's rest is also a priority. We got to rest at the right time. We can't be up late night because then we have to get up in the morning and chant our rounds. The quality of the round suffers if you're not rested well. So everything else works accordingly. So if you prioritize our chanting of the rounds in the morning, we accordingly rest at night. We accordingly, the previous day works accordingly. And then if you've chanted our rounds nicely in the morning, the rest of the day works nicely. So we are not scrambling to finish our rounds at night. I was speaking about this concept at another group a few weeks back, that we should be feeling that when we get up in the morning, that I get to chant my rounds, I get to worship the deities, I get to take darshan of the Lord, not that I have to chant my rounds. So once we get to that point where we start thinking, I get to chant the holy name, I'm given the privilege and the opportunity to chant the holy name. When you think about it that way, it completely changes the paradigm. And it shifts our thinking. It becomes a priority in our life. And it's that we get to do it. It's not that we have to do it or, well, I've taken the vow, so I have to do it. No, it's we get to do it. We have the privilege and the opportunity to do it. And that's the prioritization. And of course, we get the consistency and the faith by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, especially Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Charitamrita. We have to make it a priority to read Srila Prabhupada's books. We have to make it a priority. We have to read, we have to understand and read the Bhagavad Gita. We have to read Srimad Bhagavatam. We have to read Chaitanya Charitamrita. Of course, there are other books also like Chaitanya Bhagavat, Rabindranath Das Thakur. I would recommend we read all of that. And if we feel so inclined, we can read, Bhagavad Bhagavatamrita of Sanatana Goswami, and then Rupa Goswami's Laghu Bhagavatamrita, and all these books. We should read all of that. But at least very basic, we have to read Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Charitamrita. And beyond that, if our heart's desire is to read Valmiki Ramayana, yes, we should read that. We can read so many things, but not at the cost of this. So if you've read these books, then we can read other things. But if you haven't read this is the basic. We have to make it a priority to read. And that will give us the strength to chant our rounds nicely, which gives us the strength to develop spiritual determination. The next point also we talked about, consistency. We have to be consistent in our practice. So if we, let's say, devotees chanting rounds, you should have a consistent time of the day, preferably in the first thing in the morning when we chant our rounds. If we just chant our rounds whenever we find time, of course, I realize there could be situations where, young mothers, the children are young, so your schedule revolves around your child's schedule. Those are all exceptions. That's not going to be the permanent situation. But in general, the general rule is that we should prioritize chanting of our rounds and do it in the morning. And whatever rounds we have decided to chant or vowed to chant, preferably all 16, chant them in the morning. And be consistent. And that consistency is what's important. So Lord Krishna doesn't want us to be perfect. He wants us to be consistent. He wants us to prioritize, be determined and consistent. That's what matters. If you look at the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavatam is full of stories of people who failed. But despite failures, despite shortcomings, they persevered and they were consistent, they were determined, and then they got the mercy of the Lord. Not that they were perfect devotees and nothing ever went wrong. Story after story after story of people who fell down and then they realized their mistake and then they persisted and they got the mercy of the Lord. So, Nityananda Trilogy coming up and Jagai and Madhai. I mean, who can be more sinful than Jagai and Madhai? So we have the opportunity to really take this seriously and be consistent in our practice. And then lastly, the association of devotees. Right? So seeking out association of devotees, like-minded sincere devotees who inspire us. Like-minded sincere devotees who inspire us. And inspire us in being determined. Of course, at the same time, avoiding devotees or avoiding association of those, not just devotees, those who distract us from our focus. So these three very simple things that we can adopt in our life to develop spiritual determination. First is prioritization. Second is consistency of practice. And the third is the association of devotees who can help us strengthen our resolve and our enthusiasm to focus on Krishna consciousness. It's 6 o'clock, so I'd like just to pause here and see if there are any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna, Ananda Vilas Prabhu. Thank you so much. What a very strong presentation of this topic of spiritual determination. We'll open it up for questions now. People can, unfortunately, just those that are on the Zoom, those that are joining us through YouTube, we don't have a way to collect your questions, but those that are on Zoom, we invite you to either raise your hand or type something in the chat. Okay, we can start off with Mother Renika. You had a question from the beginning, so.
Yeah.
Here,
Hare Krishna, Prabhu Anand Vilas. Thank you so much for Sunday lecture, and it coincides with Valentine's Day. So this is a very light-hearted question. I hope you don't mind me asking this question. Is it
No,
okay
it's
to
fine.
ask?
Yes, please go ahead.
Irrespective of gender, to both Gopas and Gopikas on this call, on this Zoom call, what is your sweet Valentine's Day message?
Yeah, so my Valentine is only Radha Damodar and Gitanagri. I wish that they can keep me in their hearts. It's hard for me to keep them in their hearts, my heart, because I have so many things in my heart that I may not be able to keep them in my heart all the time. But my only wish is that Radha Damodar keep me in their heart. And we should all realize that that's the only true Valentine we have. Our deities, our lords are the only ones who are going to be with us no matter what. Right? Life after life after life. And maybe that's not the answer you wanted to hear, but
No. That's exactly the answer I wanted to hear. You nailed it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not much of a Valentine Day celebrator or anything of that sort. So yeah, my wife also doesn't expect that. So it works out.
you have any other questions, comments?
This is Vatsala Mataji. I think our eternal friend is Sri Krishna. So whatever we do, because of his grace and our Guru, Srila Prabhupada, I think we just march forward what you said just now with the determination and consistent faith and sadhana. I think, we can improve ourselves because we are not perfect beings. We have a long way to go. So in the meantime, Krishna is our eternal friend. Nobody else is going to come with us. We came with nothing, we go with nothing.
I have one more question, Prabhu.
Yes.
Well, 1 second before you go, Mother Renika. I think Haryashtra Prabhu, he opened up his microphone. I would like him to be able to speak for him.
I think I lost. Drona, can you hear me?
Yes.
I lost the view, but I don't know this, Prabhu. I came into the class late, but I'm surely going to get to know him because I was so enthused as I was setting things up, and he was speaking on determination and consistency and association. I said, "Oh, this is my kind of man," you know. And he began to talk about prioritizing. So I thought that your message was so nice, and I'm sorry that I was late. Maybe you could just give a little more emphasize a little more the results that we reap from these things that you begin to speak on. I thought it was so wonderful, and so maybe you can explain how it actually helps us in our devotional life.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the question. So I'll just speak about it from my experience as opposed to just a theoretical answer. That at least I can speak for myself. I'm not naturally attracted to Krishna. It's not like it's natural for me to just, when I see the beat bag in the morning, I'm just jumping up and down to chant my 16 rounds and do my seva. It's not natural that every weekend you go and serve the deity. So it's not natural. You want to take the easy path out. You want to do other things. But by being consistent, then it becomes a part of your life. It becomes a habit. And then you start missing it if you don't do it. So for instance, I'm a pujari and cook at Gitanagari, and I have my seva every weekend there. And for 2 or 3 weeks during the peak of the pandemic, we didn't really have anybody coming into the farm, and I was not going. And it was really hard for me to not go on the weekend. And I realized that by creating that consistency of practice, I'd made it such a big part of my life that was just not something I was able to not do. Similarly, chanting of the holy name. That when we start making chanting of the holy name the most important thing that we do in our life, the first thing we do in the morning, then that becomes a part of our life. It becomes our habit. When we cultivate these habits, they actually hold us in good stead. So the benefit of consistency and prioritization is that these things that are important for spiritual life become second nature. They become such an important integral part of your life that if you don't have it, then you start missing it. And that's when you realize that, okay, this has become part of your life. It's become part of your existence. And that's what we want to get. So at least for someone like me who's not naturally in Rajabhav and naturally attracted, I'm not at the stage of Ruchi and so on, right? So that we aspire for, as practitioners, we have to get to a point where, because of consistency and because of prioritization, the aspects of spiritual life, the limbs of spiritual service, like Shravanam, Kirtanam, become things that are integrated into our life, that we miss it if it's not there. And that's the most practical way I can think of where consistency and prioritization helps me. Does that help you? Does that help answer your question, Prabhuji?
Oh, sure it does. Yes, thank you so very much.
Okay, we have Mother Renika. You were going to have another question?
Yeah, thank you. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. One more question. I keep hearing don't associate with non-devotees. What I feel is that's not, I agree that you should associate with devotees, but you should associate with people anyways, devotees or non-devotees, because we are humans, right? We should associate with all humans. Isn't it a right way to approach other humans instead of like looking at them like, are you a devotee or are you a non-devotee or are you an atheist? Just mingle with everybody. At least try to mingle with everybody.
It's an important question, and I wanted to address it very, very clearly, right? So what it means to associate, what does it mean to associate is the important thing.
Just hang out.
No, hold on. So let me just elaborate the point, right? So what does association mean? Association means we get their state of mind. We follow their state of mind. So yes, at work, we have to work. A lot of us have jobs. We work, and we may have jobs, right? So we work with a lot of people. Now, people at work may be doing so many things that are not inconsistent with our practice. So for instance, they may be a happy hour. They may go to a happy hour. Now, we may still be required to associate with those people at work, but we can then give them our association as opposed to taking their association. So there's a little bit of a shift of mind. Meaning it doesn't mean that we isolate ourselves and don't talk to anybody who's not a card-carrying member of ISKCON or a devotee. That's not what is being said by don't associate with non-devotees. What it means is don't be influenced by them. That is the operative word. So when we say we should be influenced by sincere devotees who are practicing Krishna consciousness, and we should not be influenced by people who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. As part of our preaching, like, devotees in the Mantra Lounge in Philadelphia, they go and talk to so many people, they give them Prabhupada's books. Absolutely. Then if you're not going to just distribute books to devotees, you're going to distribute books to anybody. Srila Prabhupada was not, that was Srila Prabhupada's mindset, he would never have left Vrindavan. He would have stayed in Seva Kunj. It's not like there were a lot of devotees in the Lower East Side of New York, which is why he came there. No, he came to give his mercy. So as practitioners, the mindset is that we should not be influenced by people who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. The idea is not that we should isolate ourselves or not even talk to anybody. That is not the point. The point is we should not be influenced by them. And the reality is that it all depends on how strong our sadhana is, how strong our practice is. And I know for a fact that at least for myself, I can speak about myself, that if I associate with people who are too worldly minded and do all my association with them, then I'm going to be influenced by their thinking. That's just natural. If you're associating with very lusty and greedy people, then their thinking starts influencing you at some point. So when we say hang out or associate with people who are not devotees, the idea is not to have a superiority complex. The idea is, and this is something that we have to learn as practicing devotees, that when we approach somebody with a sense of superiority, that because I'm a devotee, I'm superior, that just completely destroys the ability to even connect with anybody. And that's not what Srila Prabhupada said. That's not what Mahaprabhu said. Mahaprabhu said, Trunadapi sunichena taroriva sahastina amanina manadina kirtaniya sadahari. The only way we can chant the holy name with a sincere mind and with focus is if you're able to be more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, offer respects to everyone and expect no respect in return. Mahaprabhu didn't say that offer respects to devotees and not to the non-devotees. Nityananda Prabhu's appearance day is coming up in a couple of weeks. Nityananda Prabhu was Yara deke tareke Krishna Upadesh. Give Krishna's instruction to everybody. He would take a straw between his teeth and roll on the ground and ask people, Bhajo Krishna, Kaho Krishna. You beg them to chant the holy name. So the idea is not that we don't associate with anybody, but we have to be very careful whose influence we let into our minds. Unless we feel that our minds are so strong that we will not be influenced by anybody, then that's a different story. But I'm yet to meet too many sadhakas where minds are so strong that regardless of what association they have, they're not influenced. At least I'm not that way. So the acharyas instruct us that you have to have some discrimination on whose influence you let into your minds. So we may still associate with people, give them Krishna consciousness, but if we feel that their association is starting to influence our ability to practice, then we have to limit it. Because the key thing is that associating with people who are not interested in Krishna consciousness should not start impacting our sincerity and our seriousness about practicing Krishna consciousness. So it's just not about meeting somebody or having somebody for dinner. It's not about that. It's about, are we allowing their propensity to influence us or not? And that's really the point that's being made here. Does that make sense? Does that help?
Yeah, I got it. You said you can mingle with everybody, but make sure that they don't influence your path.
But at the same time, if we, again, I'm just going to make sure I'm clear about the point, right? So I'm not saying we should mingle with everybody. We should be clear about how does that mingling help me in my spiritual practice, right? Just like anything that we do, right? So when I remember when I was a young kid, my mom would always say that, sit with the kids who study well and don't hang out with kids who are goofing off, right? And there's a reason for that, because my mom knew that if I just hung out with kids who were goofing off, I'd probably goof off too, right? So you want to hang out with kids, and you probably, if you have young kids, you probably tell them the same thing, that, sit with kids who are studying well, have good friends. There's a reason for that. Forget about spiritual life, even just mundane material life. People want to associate with people who are successful.
May I interject, Prabhu? This is Vatsala Ashok, my humble pranam. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. I do go along with your point. First thing is we have to have a firm faith or determination, because one thing is I'm having kind of in this snowy weather, I'm having a lot of difficulties even getting up and finishing my rounds by 4:30 or 5 o'clock. But I didn't give up on myself. Every day I said, I can do it. I can do it. Every day I tried to, with a little bit of vairagya, I said, okay, I can do it. Get up at least 5:15, 5:30, finish my rounds. And the faith and determination, what you do is very important. Another thing I wanted to share, I do have a very sweet friend. My neighbor is very sweet. She's almost 8 years old. And I love her. I like her a lot. And she's helpful to me. We know each other for quite some time. And whatever she does, she may sometimes interfere with my doing arti or aradhana, whatever I do, and chanting and discourses I take, I do. But I have to gently tell her that these are the times I'm going to be busy. But other than that, after that, I will try to answer her questions, or I will talk to her in a nice way. And she knows, she has come to my house several times. When I worship the Lord, she knows how I worship. I tell her what I do. And she knows, because with our faith, nobody's going to shake our faith. Because at this point of our life, we are not going to be really, really influenced by somebody, because everybody is essentially lusty, greedy, and all the things come up to us. But still, if we love Krishna and we know what our goal is and what Srila Prabhupada taught us, I think we can put aside some of our, lacking sense, somebody coming into trouble. We can try to overcome that. We can go on our path with firm faith. I'm sure Krishna is going to help. I have to plead sometimes with Krishna. Even though we may love our friends, but sometimes we have to say, this is the point, I have to go. It has happened. I have to help her with the snow situation and all. But still, I go ahead with my own feeling, what I feel about how to serve Krishna. So these are the 2 points I wanted to let you know. Determination, no matter what, you are going to do it. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Your class is very interesting, very very motivating, and I have to motivate myself every morning.
Thank you, Mata, for sharing.
Ananda Vilas Prabhu, wanted to take you back real quick. Maybe we can end on this. One of your initial points was about our determination should not be left up to externals. And you gave the example of kirtan. Who's leading kirtan tonight? Okay, I don't think I'll go. Oh, okay, maybe I'll go. If so-and-so's leading kirtan, or sounding good, I'll come. And earlier on in the Bhagavad Gita, earlier in this chapter, we learned the verse, Matra Sparsas tu Kunteya, that despite happiness and distress, heat and cold, so many calamities, and even what Mother Vatsala was saying about, during the pandemic here, so many people, just not getting out, they become depressed, There are a lot of externals. Maybe you could just say a few closing words on that. A lot of times we're driven by appreciation. Somebody may glorify our service, somebody may criticize us, and based on that, we may either get fired up or, lose interest in our determination. Any closing words you could maybe give us as far as how to stay, overcome these externals, especially at our young stages in spiritual life?
Thank you, Prabhu. It's a deep question, and I'll try to maybe answer as best I can. And I'm sure there are other senior devotees who can provide more insight. So I'll tell you what I do, and then maybe you can see how that applies in other devotees' life. It may not be the exact same thing. So I don't profess to know the answer to all these questions that applies equally to everybody, but I'll tell you at least what I do from keeping myself motivated from a spiritual standpoint. First of all, we have to understand why we're doing this. What is the reason we're doing this? Whatever we're doing is really to please Krishna, to please Srila Prabhupada, please the spiritual master. That is really the objective why we're practicing this process. And if we allow every single interaction, every single thing, external thing in our life to actually decide whether we continue with our practice sincerely or not, then it's going to be very difficult to keep going. Because the nature of the world is that things will deteriorate over time, whether material circumstances or everything else. Our ability to do things well, everything will change over time. The one thing that's not going to change is that our connection with the Lord and the ability of the instructions of the spiritual master to help us maintain that connection. This may seem like a very lofty point that's too esoteric, but it's actually not. When you actually break it down, it's very simple. The simple thing is that I'm practicing bhakti, I'm practicing the sadhana bhakti because of the commitment I made to my spiritual master. And I'm at least theoretically convinced that this is what will make me happy. This will actually make me happy. Back to what Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, second chapter, 6th verse. Savai punsam paro dharmo ito bhakti radokshade. Ahetuki apratiyata yayatmasu prasidati. So to completely satisfy the heart, the only thing that can satisfy the heart is bhakti. If it's performed without interruption and without motivation. And we may not have a practical realization of that point, but at least we should have a theoretical understanding of that point. And if you have a theoretical understanding of that point, then we can overcome every other distraction and every other issue by firmly rooting ourselves in that North Star. We need a North Star in our life. That North Star is Savai punsam paro dharmo ito bhakti radokshade. The instruction of the spiritual master, our connection with Krishna becomes our North Star. And all these other ups and downs, they come and go. Like you said, Matra Sparshasta Kaunteya, Shitoshna Sukudakula. Krishna says, very interesting, because Krishna never tells Arjun that become my devotee and you'll have no problems. He tells Arjun that tolerate. Tan titikshasva bharata. He says, oh Arjun, tolerate. He never tells Arjun. Nowhere in the Gita does he say that become my devotee and you will not become sick. You will not get coronavirus. No such thing is ever said. Right? So we'll still have all these problems. But we should learn to tolerate. So using that instruction, that North Star, we realize that why am I doing this? So when we have setbacks, whether it's in relationships or whether it's in so many other aspects of our life, right? Then we always realize, okay, what is the true important North Star in our life? A practice of spiritual sadhana, because everything else will come and go. If our practice of bhakti is going to be dependent on other things, then it's always going to fail. It's always going to fail, right? Just think about a mundane example of a person playing sports. If a person playing sports thinks that the only reason for me to play is if I win every time, then he's always going to be disappointed, because no matter how good you are, you're going to lose sometimes. So if your motivation for playing sports is only if you win, you're going to play, else you're going to be completely despondent. Even a mundane coach for a sports team will tell you that, you win some, you lose some. As long as you gave it your best shot, it's fine. Right? So even if you are a high school football coach or basketball coach, that's what the coach will tell you. Coach's not going to say, well, you lost the game, you're completely useless. Stop playing now. Never come back to the court. They never do that. So it's fine. You gave it a good shot, now come back next time and play better. So if a sports coach knows that, then we're supposed to be at least reading Srila Prabhupada's books, at least a little more philosophically inclined. We should know that we will fail. It's not a surprise that it's not that we may fail or we will fail, because that's why we are sadhakas, we are practitioners. So we will fail. But what do we do when we fail is the question. So that North Star is very important. So the final point I'll make is that, as sadhakas, having that North Star helps us. Every time we feel like stepping away, not doing it, or why am I doing this? Who brought me here? Look at that North Star. And then we continue to focus on our spiritual life. That's what I do, at least. So it's not like I'm always successful. I fail more often than I'm successful. But every time I fail, I look up and say, okay, you know what? This is why I started this process. This is why I'm here. And The only commitment I can make is that I cannot make a commitment that I'll be successful. But the only commitment I will make is I will never quit in my sadhana. That's my commitment. And that is what Krishna wants to see. That's the only thing that your spiritual master can ask for. That I will do it to the best of my ability. Whether I'm successful or not, Srila Prabhupada had the same mood. He wasn't convinced that he's going to build a worldwide movement when he came to America. He had no idea. But the one thing he knew, that he's not going to quit. He's not going to stop trying. And we may not be able to build 108 temples or anything. We may not be able to build even one temple. Or even preach to one devotee and make them a initiated devotee. That's okay. But we won't stop trying. And that's the thing that I look at. That's the commitment that I make. That I will not stop trying. I will not quit because I failed. I'll leave it at that, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And one last appreciation that I have, I guess, for your class. Something that you were tying it in with Srila Prabhupada's life so beautifully. And I don't know if I wanted to ask you, is there any significance to those 11-year steps in Srila Prabhupada's life? 1922, he met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. 1933, took initiation. 1944, you're given those 11-year steps. 44, he started Back to Godhead magazine. 55, Renounced Order of Life. 66, started ISKCON. Yeah, then 77, went back to Godhead. Went back to the spiritual world. Any significance in those 11-year steps?
All I can think of is transcendental coincidence. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Ananda Vilas Prabhu. Very relishable class. And thank you to all the devotees that tuned in today. Also here at the temple, we've had your class playing in 3 different locations. So we have in the temple room, there's some devotees listening. And then we also have a group of devotees that come to pack prasadam. We have prasadam pickup starting at 6 o'clock. Some devotees have already come to pick up prasadam. So those devotees were listening to the class. And then also in the kitchen, there were some devotees. The class was going on.
Our obeisances to all the devotees. And if I said something which was inappropriate, please excuse me.
I just hope you come again.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Very,
Hare
very
Krishna.
enlightening conversation. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. That was a great class.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Nice class.
We
Thank you.
appreciate it all that.
A couple of quick announcements I want to make. We want to recognize a couple things coming up this week. But first, we want to recognize and thank our Sunday Feast sponsor. Every week, we're trying to continue as much as possible, the way the Sunday Feast was. But during COVID, we can't necessarily gather, but we still have prasadam for the devotees every week. And we have a sponsor. This is made possible by the generous contributions of the devotees in our community. This week, we have a sponsor, His Grace Kaivalya Prabhu. Kaivalya Prabhu, Dr. Mahajan, his elder brother, Vidyadhar Mahajan, earlier this month, February 3rd, he passed away in India. And we want to pray for him. We really want to pray for his soul. We want to pray for his family, that Krishna comforts them during this time. We want to pray for the soul's safe journey, and that Krishna, keeps that soul protected under his lotus feet. So I ask the devotees to please, for Vidyadhar Prabhu, let's chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Also today, as mentioned a couple times, it's Valentine's Day. And for us here at ISKCON Philadelphia, the Valentine's Day represents a quite large fundraiser that we do in distributing flowers to help raise money for the temple. Because of COVID, we definitely took a step back this year. We're unable to go to the train stations. But many of the congregation have stepped forward and they sponsored flowers. You can see from the altar, the darshan we had earlier, so many of the flowers are displayed, and many of you come to pick up flowers to give to your loved ones. Those flowers are available to come if you come to take darshan tonight. The temple is open until 7:15. So we invite you all to come, have darshan, pick up some flowers, and help us with this Valentine's Day Flower Marathon. Coming up this week, we have a special appearance day. Advaita Acharya Prabhu, one of the Panchatattva, who descended to assist Lord Chaitanya in the Sankirtan mission. He's actually extremely significant in the sense that he was the one that actually petitioned and called Lord Chaitanya to come. On this day, we fast until noon, and we have a couple different programs that are available to glorify and hear about the pastimes of Advaita Acharya. So this is Thursday, during our morning Bhagavatam class, which starts at 7:50. It'll be given by His Grace Ballabhadra Prabhu, our temple president. We'll be on Advaita Acharya. And then in the evening, starting at 6:30, in lieu of the Srila Prabhupada Leela night, we're going to have a special class on Advaita Acharya by His Grace Vishnu Virat Prabhu. This will also be accompanied by Kirtan and Artik to the Panchatattva here on South Street at the Bhakti Garden. So please tune in for that. It'll be available over Zoom as well as YouTube in the evening. Throughout the week, we have classes in the morning, starting at 7:50. If you want to chant japa with us, we start at 6:30 a.m. in the same Zoom channel you're watching now. Also in the evening, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we have our Bhagavad Gita happy hour. It's a half-hour shot of Bhagavad Gita. Please tune in, get your cup of nectar. We're reading, right now, we're in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Please tune in and join that community of Bhagavad Gita enthusiasts. I also want to mention that next Sunday, we have a special guest speaker, Her Grace Rukmini Devi Dasi. She's a senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and we're very, very fortunate to have her join us. She will also be speaking about the significance of Advaita Acharya's appearance, entitled "Calling Lord Chaitanya to Appear," calling the Lord to appear. So please tune in, mark that on your calendar. We'll take a quick break from the Bhagavad Gita and resume it the following week. So we look forward to seeing everybody tonight, if you can stop by the temple. If not, throughout the week in our classes. Stay safe. Here we're going to get more snow in our forecast, but you can always keep us in association in our virtual virtual community here that we have. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you, Dronacharya.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.